Hi everyone, and a very warm welcome to this exclusive session. We have with us Merle Chen, Chief Talent Officer at the Lo and Behold Group, very exclusive, large hospitality group in Singapore. So welcome Merle, and thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank you, Esther. Nice
So
to
what
be
we're
here.
going to do today is, as you know, we are part of Talent Tech Evolve, which is our virtual conference that we're launching next week, and it's a great opportunity to have you with us. To talk about the business, talk about how HR is impacting the business, and what's the role that technology is playing, and it's a privilege to have you in this show.
Thank you.
So let's start a little bit about your mandate. You joined the group in 2017. What was the what attracted you to join the organization, and what has been the mandate and what you've been trying to drive from human resources perspective?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Esther. And I joined the Lo and Behold Group in February 2017, so it's been almost a year now. So what attracted me most was, at the time, I having had some collective experiences both from public service as well as before that in consulting. I felt that I wanted to make a deeper impact in HR, and therefore, when I saw the opportunity with Lo and Behold Group, it answered both of my passions. One is it's an area that I enjoy, in hospitality, and two, it was the ability to make impact in terms of in how we were trying to evolve our human resource practice. So yes, so that was the start of it, and since then, a year in, it's been really exciting, challenging, but a very exciting journey for us.
So I think from culture and DNA perspective, the Lo and Behold Group has been traditionally a best employer with very, compared to the average turnover of the industry, much lower than what you would expect in the hospitality space. What's the secret formula? What is it that makes the Lo and Behold so unique in employee engagement, employee retention perspective?
I think it's a combination of factors, and if I look at it, if I were to dissect it, we always talk about people first. Yeah. Even our mission is about creating awesome experiences. And I tell our HR team this: it is for HR, it is us taking care and taking care of our passionate people so that they can in turn create an awesome experience. And so for us, first and foremost is how does HR create, or the Lo and Behold, how do we create awesome experience for our employees? So it's that sort of employee first almost approach, and that's number one. So two is also, I think it's the culture aspect. So when we think about culture, I always talk about it as you can put all the architecture in place, and that forms almost like the bones of the organization, right? But if you don't have the strong culture, the heart to sustain it, then there isn't that energy that you derive passion from, right? So in sustaining that energy, you need all levels to work together. And one of the things that I'm, like I said, very proud of is the fact that our managers actually understand it. So it's not about, when you go out there, it's not lip service to say that we take care of our employees and we want to create for them an awesome experience. But at all levels, and particularly at the management level, a lot of them actually rally behind it and actually live it. Right, so our managers on the ground, our operations heads, they all live by that. So that, I think it's very important. Yeah.
So when you look ahead and you look at, hospitality is a business that I think there's a lot of technology coming on, and how you're going to serve the customers today, it may be a bit different from what you're going to be serving them tomorrow. And as a group, you've always been very ahead of the game to include technology and leverage technology and enable your staff at the ground to leverage the power of technology.
Yeah.
So if I were to ask you to paint the picture of how your business will look like in the future, how will that be different, and how are you readying yourself from talent strategy perspective to be future ready?
I think that's a really good question, and one that obviously is also at the forefront of a lot of our discussions. We live in a digital environment, and obviously that means that there will be many applications and technology advancements that we could incorporate. We go from I think back then was a point of sale system that was digital. You order through an iPad and all of that, and you can send it right back, and I can still have a conversation with you while just tapping on my phone, right? So you go from that to today. They're talking about can we have? I've read somewhere also about the friend of the receptions or the host being a machine, actually a robot. Right? And we've read some of these as well. I think the question really is, when you look at the future, is what what sort of technologies make sense for the business. Because obviously, what's not said is the fact that you do have to invest in terms of capital, right? So therefore, what makes sense? Our mission has always been about creating an awesome experience for our guests, and I think central to that belief is when you think about all the innovation and the technology there is available, one thing that cannot be replaced is the person-to-person interaction. So I think there's still a large amount of investment, and significantly we need to invest more in how do you raise that standard of an interaction, right? Because that is a memorable experience that you can't easily replace with technology. But the rest of the processes, how can you make an order, sending through the line, much faster? Yes, those are areas where technology could improve. I've also seen, some where there's also now a new technology where you can make eggs like in less than 3 minutes or something when you're using a machine. So some of those processes, repetitive type of work, that's highly administrative or manual, that has almost zero sort of guest interaction or impact, then in those areas you should look at technology to improve. And those are areas that we potentially could look at or are looking at as well. But I wouldn't say that we really are. I wouldn't put us in terms of the technology. I wouldn't put us at the forefront of all of that. But I think we're more of an early majority. We do adopt as quickly as we can. So, for example, we have a biometric system for time tracking. Back then, it was all by manual rostering and all that. So we were one of the first to also introduce that in our outlets. But whether or not that makes sense, because that was not so much guests. But it just helped the administrative process at the back end. So that's looking sort of back. Looking ahead, we've made investments in unifying our finance and HR technology. So again, to the point of the back end functions, a lot of HR and finance work is, at this point, like most growing companies, still highly administrative in nature, fairly manual to a certain extent. And so we do envision that with the unifying of HR and finance on a single platform, it could help us to really, elevate a lot of the manual administrative tasks and hopefully elevate finance and HR as a value-added partner to the business, where you can really help the business to grow, and not just grow, but to also look at other areas that they could improve. So that is one of the plans of where we're going. We've already embarked on it, so we hope that by end of this year we should go live with HR, and that will also improve the employee experience. So, because a bulk of our employees are actually based at our concepts, so you don't, if you want to check for leave and all that, it's not so easy to go to find a laptop to log in, right?
You should be able to do it on your phone.
Exactly. So you should be able to.
That's the vision.
Correct. So that's the vision. Everything just from your mobile, you can access all your records, apply for courses, perhaps in time even have little bite-sized courses that you could take on the application.
That's right.
So that's the vision for HR, I would say.
So how challenging or how easy it was for us to build a business case to implement technology? Because I think for our viewers who come from larger organizations, that's probably already there. But we also have a lot of viewers who maybe across the region are really still, as you're saying, fairly administrative, fairly pen and paper, and there's a huge opportunity to leapfrog because technology is available already.
Yes.
So how did you build that business case, and how would you advise others who are watching us today to say, okay, go ahead, this is how you build a business rationale?
So I think a lot of it starts from, first and foremost, you need to assess where you are now. I mean, where you are now. And when I came in at that time, a lot of it was observing what the team was doing. So what were they doing? How much of it was administrative and why? So a lot of it was around questioning our current state. And then after looking at that and then thinking about what the future state might look like, like I mentioned, I may have touched on this briefly earlier, but if you think about our employee group, it's a little bit different from where I came from previously, because in professional services, most of us are actually at our desks. So maybe not that difficult to log in from your desk, and do a HR transaction or a finance transaction for that matter. But when you have employees that most of them are not in HQ, they're all out in our concepts and may not have access to the hardware, but they do have access to a mobile, then you think from that basis and go, it makes sense if they can transact. Because if you look at, going back to the business case, going back to the assessment phase, what we noticed was many of the employees were calling in and actually asking questions of how much leave do I have left and how many can I take? How do I apply for leave? So
which
questions
is very
like this,
hygiene.
which is very hygiene, exactly. And so from that point of view, even then, updating their particulars, they had to call in to inform their change of address. So to us, it was, how much of our time is spent doing those transactions. And it didn't take long. If you do a very quick study, just take a month or so, you can, of course, embark on a more detailed work hours study. How much time is HR, for that matter, spending on transactions like that. And you can almost, in a month, get to where you need to do. So we did the same, but, not as, I wouldn't say we didn't take too long to work on that, because just by the number of tickets, so to speak, that you get, you would roughly know the volume of transactions.
That's right.
Yeah. So from that perspective, then after was actually obviously evaluating what was out there. And you're right that today, I think it's a much different climate from back then. And this is going back maybe 5-8 years even, where there weren't that many applications, so ready applications or bespoke applications, if for that matter. But today there are many. So you can look at it from a bespoke point of view, or go unified. All right. So we went with a unified platform only because we had the same issue with finance. All right. So my CFO who joined about the same time as I did, the two of us came together and we sat down and said, look, we have pretty much similar in terms of the transaction volume. We're transacting at very, very administrative level. Transactions that if they could do it themselves or self-service, it would free up a lot of my employees' time. So HR and finance team members bandwidth. So after having that assessment, we decided that then we presented the case for a unified platform as opposed to bespoke. And to be fair, the thing with bespoke, you can have multiple applications or technologies, but the thing with bespoke you do have to be aware of is there will always be integration costs, which are slightly unseen. So when you weigh out the two, you realize that actually potentially a unified platform may better serve your organization, although the cost might look like it's a little bit more. Because on the bespoke side of the house, you don't see the integration problems that you might have and the associated costs. Yeah. So then we presented that obviously to our founder. Like I mentioned much earlier in this conversation, I think clarity of mandate and sponsorship is very important. So our mandate was to create an awesome experience for our employees, and that we have not strayed. So because of that clarity of the mandate, technology was an enabler to get there. So that was how we put up our case.
Wonderful. Thank you. And you spoke and you referred to your peer, your CFO, as kind of like a partner in that journey.
Yes.
And I'm really intrigued because in many organizations, somehow the finance and the HR, I think from what you're sharing, there's a huge opportunity to work together.
Yes.
So is it, because you work in consulting as well, you work in public sector, what would be your advice to both HR leaders and finance leaders to say find a common ground, because there's a huge opportunity to enable the organization? What has been your learnings?
So even from the past organization that I was at, I also valued the fact that HR and finance were fairly close. Yes, we'd have our budgets and they'd come back and sort of question you on the money that you're spending. But I think there is some common ground that you can get to. For us in this instance, the common ground that we were after was the fact that we saw that a huge opportunity for both teams to elevate manual transactions. So for HR and finance, if you look at our evolution journey, both functions have come from a huge or large administration base. So we have the same backstory, if you will. Finance has obviously come up slightly, in terms of the ability to do analyses and all of that. So finance as a function has also transformed over the years, right? So it's about, the fact that we share a commonality in terms of backstory can bring you both together. But the way forward is also finding a common ground to tie you both together. So maybe it's about asking questions like, if you and I, combined, what sort of analytics do you think we could get?
So much.
Because that was my starting point. It was about, look, I'm calculating for example, I was calculating productivity per worker, turnover per worker, performance appraisal, like how my high potentials perform and all that. And I was, and it intrigued me, and I went to finance and said, if you think about it, will it not be powerful if I can tell you my high potentials, how much they're contributing to the revenue? Wouldn't that be interesting for you? Rather than, and vice versa. And so we started from there, and that was how we sort of like found that commonality, so to speak.
So I'm going to ask you a couple of more questions on that piece, but before I go there, you were sharing what were the different alternatives that you look for in technology, and what were the pluses and minuses. And for our viewers who may be in a similar situation, that are actually exploring, on-premise, on-cloud, integrated, bespoke. If you could help us declutter, how did you go through taking that decision? You already mentioned a little bit, but if you could double-click, that'll be great.
Great. So I think the first in deciding whether it's on-prem or cloud, because today, cloud software as a service, right? It's easy to activate, not difficult to build in a very short period of time. So you could get that going quite quickly. Whereas on-prem will take a little bit more time. But if you have considerations around data restrictions, like some agencies would, like government agencies or the like, then classification and confidentiality of the data, if it's very important, then you may not be able to embark on software as a service, because in the cloud world, that's not the operating principle. Right? Not that it's not secure, it's just a different operating principle. So that's, I think, some of the considerations you need to have. On-prem, and obviously they would do their own checks and evaluation, but generally speaking, my belief is on-premise tends to be a little bit more expensive. So for us, that was not an option, and we didn't have the space as well for it, because you would have the on-prem server and all of that housed within. As you grow, it may be also harder to sustain.
It's more difficult to scale?
Yes, it's maybe more difficult to scale, because you would need, obviously, the space to have the additional servers and so on for on-prem as a solution. Whereas with cloud, as we all know today, even if you grow in terms of employee size, you just fall into the next bracket of the licensing. That's about it for subscription. So that, and also the second is with cloud solutions, updates tend to be built in as well. So they're a lot faster. So when the next version comes out, that can be sort of like pushed down and updated as you go. So that's some beauty to that. So when we evaluated, those are some of the considerations. Then between software as a service to bespoke, that's another consideration you need to have. You need to ask yourself the question, in terms of your architecture, how many solutions, how many bespoke solutions can you handle? Because like I mentioned earlier, the more you have bespoke, and if the information needs to be integrated in order to provide you with the end analytics, then the more bespoke you have, the harder it is, because you must always, I use this analogy a fair bit with my HR team. I say that, in the end you must think of it like a telephone line, right? So we've all played this game before, the broken telephone. So the more parties you have, the communication and therefore the data gets chopped up as you go along. So you must always factor in that integration is not 100%. And if it impacts you, then maybe bespoke with too many applications is not the right way to go. So that was how we, I suppose, evaluated our options.
Makes sense. Wonderful. So when is the rollout going to happen, or is it as we speak?
So as we speak, we've just completed the design phase of it, the phase 1. We're into phase 2 right now. We should go live by June, hopefully, as with all things. It was a very aggressive timeline, because we only started this process in October last year. So again, because we chose cloud, so rapidly you can provision it very quickly with very little additional resources that you really need. So within a very short period of time, you can get it up and going.
So if you were to start again, and I know you're still in the middle, but if you were to start again phase 1, what would you do differently?
I would probably be a little less aggressive on the timeline.
More realistic?
Yes, maybe. And also, but honest truth is, what I would probably do differently is factor in more time for data prep. I think, we were, funnily enough, someone else or others who had actually gone on this journey had already told me, beware, don't
have to go through it yourself.
Yes, I do think so. So someone had already told me that, when you go through this process, make sure you factor in enough time for data preparation, because you convert your data or even the way you...
Don't underestimate the time.
Yes, don't estimate that.
You're like,
And I said, okay. So maybe an additional, maybe 2-3 weeks, that would do. That would surely do the job. And that's not been enough. I think the reason for it is because our vision and our mandate was very clear. We're using technology to transform our process. So for some organizations, it's like, I'm going to take whatever my processes are and, force the technology to adopt to mine. But ours was different. We chose to adopt whatever the technology could deliver, and we adapt accordingly. So, but by doing so, you need to throw out a lot of like legacy and things that weren't right. And as you would prep the data, you were doing that. So it's actually
opening that box for the first time, and you don't actually knew what is going to be inside.
Correct. So you are almost actually, what in most technology adoption, you're actually doing change management towards the end, right? But we're not. We're actually doing change management as we go. Yeah. So the moment we found something, for example, the org structure, matrix lines that needs to be cleaned up, we were like, okay, let's hold the data prep. Let's talk to those stakeholders, get them thinking along those lines, and then prep the data. Correct. So I think because of that kind of switching and effort, that's why the data prep is longer, because it's not so easy as just taking the whatever you've got and plonking it there. You can do that, but if you do that, then you must be aware.
You're missing the opportunity on actually revisiting some of that, structures.
Correct. Yes, you're right. So what you're missing is, exactly that. You're missing the opportunity to reform and transform your processes as you go. And then the technology may render itself a little bit less effective. Absolutely. So it's not the technology's fault. It's actually the fact that, you've taken all your current processes that may not have been great, and you're forcing the technology to adapt to you. So therefore, by virtue of that, it does make that process or render it a little less effective.
Yeah. So if I push you, because we spoke a lot about the short term and how are you driving a lot of that change and transformation, and how you're partnering with your peers to be able to do that. If I push you to probably expand and you were to think about the role that you think HR should play in the future, which is more taking you out of like 5 years, 10 years from today, where do you see the role that you will be playing as an HR leader? How would that be if you were to define that future and how HR would look like then?
I hope it will be now.
You're in a hurry. You're a woman in a mission.
Dynamic, I think. So I think we've heard this many times before, and I think most HR professionals would also know the work of like Dave Ulrich, right? What HR leaders should be. At that time was HR as a business partner, HR as an employee champion, all of those things. And I believe those are still important. But at the end of the day, it's also to deliver value to the business. Right? And how do businesses derive and deliver value? A lot of it, and you obviously hear this a lot, but it's all about human capital. You can't run away from it, because that's the single biggest resource, capital that you really have. Aside from your technology and the equipment that you have and all that, you still need people to use those, right? So I would say that's your single biggest investment, right? So I think HR, therefore, by association, can actually play a very defining role in how the business delivers value to its people. So it's all about also thinking through the right sort of practices, the policies, the processes, what it needs to actually help I would say, increase the investment capital of its people. So that would be, I would say, the value that HR would bring. Other than obviously all the work that we've known, there's also that need for HR to, increasingly we become also a bit of a chief technology to a certain extent. So the familiarity with technology, because in a digital world, and also the fact that we have more and more applications and technology coming online and advancement faster than we can actually imagine. That will greatly change your ability to deliver that value, accelerate that journey for us, as it were. Right? So because of that, and then I do think that as HR, you can't run away from not understanding or knowing what technologies are available, how can use it right, and also selecting and using it right in order to help the business accelerate its value. So that will be a kind of a combination of what I see. Obviously, another offshoot to that is also the marketing aspect, because other than that, it's also about marketing the proposition, the branding of the organization, being that face for the organization as well, because that's what you would present to potential hires. Right? So again, it's that whole sort of curve, if you will.
So in terms of skills, and you spoke about HR aligning to business and business outcomes. You also spoke about the importance to be equipped with technology and understanding technology. And you also spoke about the marketing side. So what would be your advice for maybe aspiring CHROs to say, well, I'm in that process to aspire for a CHR role. What would be the skills and competencies that I need to build to be able to really bring that value to the business?
I think skills-wise, I mean, on the curve, I would think one of it is obviously building ability to communicate and influence. I would say, other than all the other HR, the very nice HR bare minimum competencies, but I would say that one important one is actually communication and ability to communicate and influence. Not just in a manner that, not a direct line, I would say, but more, for example, working with your peers, seeing how you can leverage off others, others in terms of their strengths and, other departments as well, and how can you leverage that together to grow a bigger, to derive that same value. So I think a lot of it's around that level of influencing or persuasion, right? Communicating is about communicating a bit of the, that perhaps as you're preparing to go upwards, is communicating first to the people what it's all about, and you need to make the messages relevant, right? So it's great that we know all of these HR policies and practices and what it should be and not and all that, but sometimes it's you need to make that language resonate with the employee profile and the audience that you have. So it's only here that we talk about it like it's a competency framework. But when I go to the business, I don't tell them that. When I go
they don't care.
Yes.
Like, what's the point?
Correct. So for the business, I communicate it differently. I said, look, if we could today and tomorrow know who our high pros and high performers are, where do you think that would take us? That's value.
So everyone is listening.
So it's like, oh yes, obviously, because if I knew how the high posts were and I invested in them, would that not give me greater value tomorrow?
Of course, naturally.
So that's from that. But when you go to the large of your other group of the bulk of your employees, you don't say that because they'll be like, what are you talking about? You would tell them that, look, my end goal is that I want everyone who's walking into a performance appraisal discussion to know where they are and how the organization can help you support your development. So it's a communication, it's a messaging, and to make that relevant to the audience that you're speaking to. So that I would say is one. And two, the mindset. I would say that HR as a whole needs to continue to learn, to be open. So to be open to new developments that are potentially outside HR. Like tech didn't come from HR. In fact, all of that came from the technology world. So you're just maybe looking out and adopting, right? When I think about HR technology. So it's just keeping an open mind as to what could work in your scenario, borrowing maybe some ideas from somewhere else, it could be, and then, or other industries for that matter.
Wonderful. Thank you, Merle. I can't even believe that we've been speaking for such a long time. It's been fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you guys, everyone, for joining us today. A conversation with Merle Chen, Chief Talent Officer at the Lo and Behold. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.